My husband stole my credit card and left, but he had no idea what awaited him. Before we continue, please tell me which country you're watching from and make sure you're subscribed to the channel as I share interesting life stories with you daily. Enjoy listening. Victor entered the room with a confident smile, casually tossing his sunglasses onto the coffee table. He felt incredibly at ease in his perfectly tailored suit and flawless shoes, exuding that same aura of superiority I knew so well. Beside him stood suitcases proudly displaying the most expensive brands. First-class flights to Europe, five-star hotels, the lifestyle I so desperately missed. "Marina," he announced, a glint in his eyes. I couldn't help but let out a short, genuine laugh. He immediately frowned, irritated. "What's so funny?" he asked. "Oh, Victor," I said. I'm shaking my head with a cynical smile. "You have no idea what you just did." "My name is Marina. I'm 32 years old, and I work in cybersecurity. For 6 years, I was married to Victor, a man who, beneath a mask of charm, hid a rather questionable character. He was the one who made grand promises and built ambitious plans. I, on the other hand, was the one who brought these plans to life, while he jumped from one wild idea to another, fueled by hopes and his persuasive speeches. I maintained our household with my stable career. The warning signs were always there, but due to stubbornness or love, I chose to believe we were building something together, a home, a family, and so it continued until last week, when everything collapsed. It happened late at night, around 2 o'clock. I was sleeping upstairs, completely unaware that Victor was making a mistake his eloquence couldn't possibly rectify. He waited until I fell asleep and took my laptop. As a cybersecurity specialist, I'm trained to recognize such things, but I never imagined I'd have to use these skills in my own home. That night, Victor used my computer to access the data of one of my credit cards. He copied the information, took photos with his phone, and returned to bed without a second thought, as if nothing had happened. The next morning, when I realized something was amiss, I opened my banking app and immediately saw the evidence. Nearly $10,000 spent on designer clothing, expensive watches, and a first-class ticket to Paris. My breath caught in my throat, and the puzzle quickly fell into place. Of course, Victor was behind it. But instead of panicking, I smiled. He had fallen right into his own trap. The card he used wasn't my personal one. It was a dummy credit card linked to a training program I run at work. It exists to teach companies how to identify and prevent fraud. Every transaction Victor made triggered automatic alerts. And so, with a cup of coffee in hand, I watched the notifications. For the first time in years, I felt in control. It was the beginning of the end for Victor, and he had no idea. The case immediately went to the authorities, and Victor didn't suspect for a moment that he had just become the perfect training example. That same morning, I called my lawyer, Julia. "You won't believe what happened," I began, telling her all the details. On the other end of the line, Julia couldn't help but laugh. "Wait, let me get this straight," she said, Wink still chuckling. "Your husband tried to steal money using a fake card, one tied to a fraud detection program?" "Exactly," I replied. "But he doesn't even understand what he's doing." "Clever," Julia observed. "He's a true criminal genius. Every purchase he made is being tracked. Have the authorities contacted you yet?" "Not yet, but it's only a matter of time." The rest of the week I behaved calmly, observing from the sidelines how far Victor would go. A few days later, I found a note on the kitchen counter. "Don't wait up for me." I immediately understood what it meant. He was spending stolen money to live his dream life, or rather, my nightmare, somewhere abroad. Every night, I tracked the fraudulent transaction notifications on my phone. Lavish restaurants, five-star hotels, expensive purchases. Each notification was a small victory, and 3 days after his spree, I received a call. "We've detected a series of suspicious transactions linked to your account," the officer explained. "Do you know who might be behind this?" "Yes, without hesitation," I replied. "It's my husband." A brief pause hung on the line before he asked, surprised, "Your husband?" I explained the entire situation, including the fact that the card was part of a cybersecurity training program. "My God," I heard a quiet whistle of admiration. "I've never encountered anything like it. he said. "You'll need to give an official statement, but based on what we've already discovered, he's in serious trouble." I patiently waited for Victor to finally show up. It seemed like nothing had happened. He entered the living room with the confidence of someone who had just conquered the world, dressed in expensive clothes and with suitcases adorned with luxury brands. "Thanks for the upgrade," he said with a smug grin. "This time, you've truly outdone yourself." I couldn't hold back my laughter. He stopped, frowning, expecting me to be furious. "What's so funny?" he asked irritably. "Oh, Victor," I replied, shaking my head. "You'll find out soon enough." Dropping his designer backpack on the floor, he took off his custom-made jacket and casually hung it on the back of the sofa. "Seriously, Marina?" he asked, already knowing the answer. I leaned against the kitchen counter, crossing my arms. "How exactly did you think this would end?" He laughed and kicked off his expensive shoes. "You were always so strict with money. Not that you couldn't afford it." I smiled subtly, letting him continue. Every word he spoke was another nail in his own coffin. "So, the watches, the flights, the hotels. You thought those were my gifts?" I asked, tilting my head slightly. "Of course," he replied, pointing to himself. "It's time for you to relax and enjoy all the pleasures of life." As he headed to the bathroom, humming a tuneless melody, I took out my phone and texted Julia. "He's back, ready to move on." "Excellent," she replied. "I'll inform Artem." Throughout that week, Julia and Artem meticulously worked on the case against Victor. Every transaction was traced, every purchase meticulously documented, from luxury clothing boutiques to chic hotels in Paris. His spending painted a portrait of a man who considered himself invincible, and Artem assured me that the fraudulent card notification had already initiated a full-scale investigation. "We'll bring him in for questioning as soon as you give the signal," he said. And he, none the wiser, was singing in the bathroom as if he didn't have a single care in the world. I, on the other hand, felt a surprising sense of calm. For years, I had allowed Victor to exploit my trust, my patience, and my financial stability, but now he would finally face the consequences. When he emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, with a self-satisfied smirk, I returned his smile. He had no idea what awaited him. He collapsed onto the sofa with a victorious air, as if he were the hero of a great achievement. "You should have seen Paris," he exclaimed, rummaging through his bag until he pulled out a shiny gold watch. "The shops, the restaurants. It was like my dreams." He began to describe his week of luxury in detail, with theatrical gestures and unnecessary commentary like the quality of champagne at some rooftop elite bar. Every word sounded like a confession, though he didn't realize it himself. Meanwhile, my phone, hidden in my apron pocket, was recording every detail of this display. "This recording will soon be sent," he said, turning the watch on his wrist to admire it. "No one suspected anything, not even you." The next morning I met Julia at a cafe to discuss the final details. She scrolled through the fraud alerts, the lavish purchases, and of course, the recording from last night. "It's all set," she declared confidently. "Artem is already coordinating with local police for the arrest." I nodded, them feeling the full weight of it all settle upon me. "What happens next?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "He'll be charged with fraud, identity theft, and unauthorized use of financial accounts. Given the amount, the consequences will be severe. In the best-case scenario, he'll take a plea deal. In the worst, he'll be in prison." I tried to feel pity for him, but then I remembered his arrogance and the pattern of selfishness I had tolerated for too long. Later that night, Victor was lounging on the sofa, engrossed in his phone, when I heard a decisive knock at the door. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from a strange premonition. I walked to the door and opened it to find Artem and two uniformed police officers. "Good evening, Marina," Artem said, professional yet polite. "Is Victor home?" "Yes, he's here," I replied, stepping aside to let them in. "Feel at home." Victor tore his gaze from his phone and frowned in confusion. "What's going on?" he asked, settling back on the sofa. "Victor, you're under investigation for multiple charges of fraud and financial crimes. We ask that you come with us to provide a statement." Victor's face turned pale, and all his confidence vanished in an instant. "No, this must be a misunderstanding," he stammered, looking at me helplessly. "Marina, tell them this is madness." I crossed my arms and tilted my head slightly. "I don't know, Victor. You've been so busy lately. Maybe you should explain everything to them yourself." As the police began to read him his rights, Victor stood up protesting. "This is a setup. You're my wife. You shouldn't be against me." I let out a dry laugh and leaned against the door. "Funny, Victor. I thought husbands didn't steal from their wives. I guess we'll both learn something today." His bravado vanished, replaced by desperation. "You won't get away with this," he shouted as they led him away. I watched for a few seconds, gazing at the empty space where he had been just minutes before. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from the feeling that I was finally free. He was gone. Forever. About an hour later, Julia called me. "They've started the interrogation," she said, her voice calm but determined. "According to Artem, Victor is already trying to manipulate the story." "Let me guess," I said. "He's making himself the victim." "Precisely," Julia replied, her tone measured. "He claims you gave him permission to use the card, but don't worry. With all the fraud alerts, trace purchases, and your recording, he has no chance." The next morning, Artem called me again. "We have everything we need," he reported. "Your husband, ex-husband, admitted to using it, but he claims he didn't know it was part of a fraud detection program. He's trying to shift the blame onto you due to confusion." "That sounds like him," I replied, leaning back in my chair. "And what now?" "We'll continue to work through everything," Artem explained. "He'll face multiple charges, and given the amount, the consequences will be severe. Oh, and about the purchases. The buyer protection program has already reimbursed those transactions. You won't be held responsible for anything." Relief washed over me immediately, almost overwhelming. Finally, I had closed this chapter of my life, confident that Victor would finally face the consequences of his actions. For years, I'd carried the burden of Victor's actions, finding loopholes in an imperfect system. But hearing the confidence in Artem's voice, I fully grasped the magnitude of my victory. "Thank you for everything," I said sincerely. "Don't thank me," he replied with a smile. "You handled it brilliantly." Victor's downfall was faster and more devastating than I'd anticipated. News of his arrest spread like wildfire among our acquaintances. The facade of the charming, carefree husband crumbled within days. Daria, a woman I had always suspected might be involved with him, abandoned him without hesitation upon hearing of the charges. His luxury possessions were confiscated, flights cancelled, and bank accounts frozen. He was alone and cornered. One night, a call came in. The number was unfamiliar. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Marina," a hoarse voice on the other end revealed his identity. "I need to talk to you." I couldn't suppress a dry laugh. "Victor, the only thing you need to do is explain yourself to yourself." He tried to insist, his tone fluctuating between anger and pleading. "I made a mistake, okay? I didn't want it to come to this." "You just tried to deceive me," I interrupted, my voice as cold as ice. "You just hoped I'd be blind or too patient to notice." A long pause followed before he whispered, "I thought you loved me." I sighed heavily, feeling my anger bubble up. I had loved Victor, the Victor I thought he was, but the man who lied, stole, and tried to use me? Him I could never love. Before he could reply, I hung up. A week later, Julia called me with news. "He's accepted the plea agreement," she said. "He won't go to prison, but he'll have to return every penny. Additionally, he's been assigned community service." "Sounds fair," I replied with a slight smile. "He always wanted to live well. Now he'll understand what it's like to earn it himself and live without money." Julia laughed. "You're handling this much better than most people." I reflected for a moment and said, "For years, I was the one who turned a blind eye, tolerating his charm and ambition. His absence from my life wasn't a loss, but rather a gift, a chance to rebuild my life without the constant shadow of his egoism." For the first time in many years, I felt truly free. In the days that followed, The silence in the apartment was almost unnerving, but also comforting. Julia came to help me with the final paperwork, not forgetting her usual practicality. "How are you?" she asked, sitting on the sofa. "Better than I expected," I admitted, handing her a cup of coffee. "It's strange, but I don't feel anger, only relief." She smiled understandingly. "Because you won, Marina. You didn't just survive this, you became stronger." As we went over things, I realized that the financial restitution from Victor was just a minor detail. The most important thing was that I had finally reclaimed my independence. For years, I had accepted unfair terms in our relationship, thinking it was better to avoid conflict. But now, I understood that a peace built on silence and concessions was not a true peace. A week later, the official divorce letter arrived in a modest envelope, too small for something so significant. I held it for a few minutes, allowing the weight of it all to settle before opening it. Victor had tried to contact me several times, sending messages through acquaintances with cryptic apologies, emails, and even a letter filled with promises and regrets that sounded almost comical. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. He had made his choice, and I had made mine. Occasionally, rumors of his life reached me. They said he was trying to find work, his reputation ruined by fraud charges. He had moved back in with his parents and still seemed confident that everything could be fixed. A month later, after the process was finalized, Julia and I met for brunch, which had become a small ritual since Victor left my life. Between conversations, she asked, "And what now? What are your plans?" I smiled, in feeling a sense of peace and enthusiasm I hadn't experienced in a long time. "Honestly, I'm focused on myself. Work is going well, and I'm thinking maybe I'll go somewhere quiet, to the mountains." Julia raised her glass and said with a smile, "Now that's what I like to hear. You deserve it." For the first time in years, I felt I was making decisions on my own, without compromise, without hidden intentions, just the freedom to live by my own rules, to heal, to travel. One evening, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine in hand, watching the city lights in the distance. I thought about everything I had been through, the betrayal, the broken heart, the fight for what was mine. All this suffering had brought a lesson. There was no longer anger or resentment, only gratitude. Victor's betrayal had forced me to see my own strength, to stop settling for less, and to put my own happiness first. I learned to trust my instincts, to value my independence, and to never again let someone control my life. I raised my glass to a toast under the starry sky, a toast to me, a toast to a new beginning, and with that, I definitively closed the chapter on Victor. I was ready to embrace whatever the future held with a light heart and the certainty that the best part of my life was just beginning. Did you enjoy this story? Please write in the comments below. Your opinion is very important to us. Thank you for listening. See you tomorrow.